A bulldozer idled on the edge of my backyard, its massive shovel inches from the koi pond I built by hand 3 summers ago. The woman standing next to it wore designer athletic wear and a visor that probably cost more than my monthly internet bill. She barked orders at 2 landscapers she'd clearly hired off some sketchy website, waving her arms like she was conducting the world's most aggressive orchestra. "Rip it all out," she commanded with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no in her life. "This is HOA property now, and we're installing regulation-compliant landscaping." I stood there in my favorite worn Crocs, holding my morning cold brew, and didn't say a single word. Instead, I just raised my phone and hit the record button, making sure to capture every moment as this woman waved what looked like an official deed in the air like she was Moses coming down from the mountain with the 10 Commandments. 10 minutes later, the police were indeed on the scene. But they weren't there to stop the bulldozer from destroying my property. No, they were clicking handcuffs onto her wrists while she shrieked about her rights as HOA president. The charges included criminal trespassing, fraud, and attempted illegal seizure of private property. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me rewind and tell you how Deborah Quill, self-appointed queen of the Lakeshore Bluffs HOA, ended up in the back of a squad car instead of bulldozing my backyard paradise. My name is Preston Hale, and I've lived by one simple rule for the past decade: don't bother me and I won't bother you. It served me well as a freelance graphic designer who bought this lakefront cabin in Otter Pines long before the area exploded with cookie-cutter subdivisions and their vinyl-sided mediocrity. When I moved here 10 years ago, this was still a quiet spot where you could hear the loons at night, and the only traffic was the occasional deer family crossing through the yard. I chose this place specifically because it wasn't part of any homeowners association. No ridiculous rules about grass height, no mandated beige paint colors, no monthly meetings about whether holiday decorations could go up before Thanksgiving. Just me, my fish, my Photoshop projects, and blessed peace. That peace came to a screeching halt the day Deborah Quill moved into the new development across the woods. Within 48 hours of her arrival, she'd somehow gotten herself elected president of the newly formed Lakeshore Bluffs HOA. This was a woman who carried a laminated rules binder everywhere she went and treated her clipboard like it was an emotional support animal. Within a week of her coronation as HOA president, I found a thick envelope stuffed into my mailbox. Inside was what she called a welcome packet, complete with a $300 HOA dues invoice stapled to the top and a passive-aggressive note about how excited she was to have me join their community standards initiative. I sent it back with my own note, written on the back of a grocery receipt: "I'm not in your HOA. My property predates your subdivision by a decade. Please stop." Apparently, Deborah took this as a declaration of war. What started as minor annoyances quickly escalated into full-blown harassment. First came a notice about my supposedly non-regulation mailbox, which had been standing perfectly fine for longer than her subdivision had existed. Then I received a citation for what she called unauthorized decorative rocks along my driveway. These were literally just rocks I'd pulled from the lake shore when I first moved in. I ignored every single notice, filing them away in what I started calling my crazy neighbor folder, thinking she'd eventually get bored and move on to terrorizing someone else. But Deborah Quill didn't get bored. She got creative. She started sending teenagers in orange safety vests to inspect my property line, claiming they were conducting official HOA boundary assessments. Then she hired a drone service to monitor what she called shoreline compliance, which basically meant some kid with a $200 drone was buzzing over my dock every morning while I tried to drink my coffee in peace. The real kicker came when she started posting about me in the neighborhood Facebook group. According to her posts, I was single-handedly destroying property values with my unkempt natural landscaping. She even claimed I was polluting the lake with what she called unfiltered graphic design runoff, which doesn't even make sense if you think about it for more than 2 seconds. When none of her intimidation tactics worked, Deborah crossed the line from annoying neighbor to actual criminal. She created a forged plat of survey, a completely fabricated map that somehow proved my land had always been part of the HOA jurisdiction. The thing looked like a 5th grader had drawn it in Microsoft Paint, but she'd added enough official-looking stamps and signatures to make it seem legitimate at first glance. She submitted this masterpiece of fiction to the county records office, then used it as justification to schedule a landscaping crew to completely renovate my backyard according to HOA standards. She didn't just want to fine me anymore. She wanted to physically take control of my property. On that crisp Tuesday morning when everything came to a head, Deborah marched onto my lawn like she was storming the beaches of Normandy. She had her trusty clipboard, a pumpkin spice latte that probably cost $8, and that wildly falsified property deed that she genuinely seemed to believe gave her authority over my land. "This property is being reclaimed under community authority," she announced in a tone that suggested she'd practiced this speech in her bathroom mirror. "The HOA is exercising its right of eminent domain for the betterment of the lakefront community aesthetic." The bulldozer driver revved his engine, clearly uncomfortable but apparently being paid enough to not ask questions. I kept filming everything while calmly pulling up my lawyer's number with my other hand. Then I called the county assessor's office. Then the sheriff's department. Deborah stood there, tapping her designer sneaker impatiently while insisting she had full legal standing to tear up my yard. She kept waving that forged deed around like it was a magic wand that could make property laws disappear. The sheriff arrived within 15 minutes, and I'll never forget the look on his face when he examined the map Deborah had submitted as evidence of her authority. He squinted at it for a solid 30 seconds before looking up with an expression of pure disbelief. "Ma'am," he said in the flattest tone I've ever heard from a law enforcement officer, "this is a map of SeaWorld Orlando." Deborah blinked. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Then she did what any reasonable person would do when caught committing multiple felonies. She tried to run. She didn't get very far. Turns out designer athletic wear isn't great for actual athletics, and she made it about 20 feet before tripping over her own landscaping crew's equipment. As it turns out, forging land ownership documents is a serious felony that the state doesn't take lightly. Deborah's amateur hour forgery triggered a comprehensive investigation not just into her activities, but into the entire Lakeshore Bluffs HOA operation. The investigators discovered she'd been misusing association funds for personal purchases, fabricating bylaws that gave her powers the HOA never actually had, and enforcing fines on multiple properties that weren't even within the HOA's legal jurisdiction. I was contacted by the State Attorney General's office to serve as a witness in what was becoming a much larger case than anyone had anticipated. Meanwhile, Deborah was contacted by Detective Smalls from the Economic Crimes Unit, who showed up at her door with a warrant and a very serious expression. The investigation revealed that Deborah had collected over $40,000 in illegal fines from residents who weren't actually part of the HOA. She'd used HOA funds to pay for personal vacations, claiming they were leadership development conferences. She'd even tried to use association money to hire a private investigator to dig up dirt on me when I wouldn't comply with her demands. The next HOA meeting was hastily scheduled in a middle school cafeteria because Deborah had been using HOA funds to rent unnecessarily expensive conference spaces for their usual meetings. She was mid-sentence, passionately declaring that the community needed to reclaim the lakefront for what she called aesthetic cohesion, when two deputies walked through the cafeteria doors. The entire room went silent as they approached the podium where Deborah stood frozen, her laser pointer still aimed at a poorly made PowerPoint slide about grass height regulations. When they pulled out the handcuffs, she actually had the audacity to gasp, "But I'm the president," as if that title somehow made her immune to criminal prosecution. They escorted her out while she continued protesting about her authority and the importance of maintaining property values. I sat in the back row, slowly sipping my Mountain Dew and offering a polite golf clap as she was led away. In the end, Deborah Quill was convicted on multiple counts of fraud, forgery, and embezzlement. She was sentenced to 3 years in prison, though she'll probably serve 18 months with good behavior. She was also ordered to pay back $78,000 in restitution to all the people she'd illegally fined or stolen from. The look on her face when the judge read the sentence was a mixture of shock and indignation, as if she still couldn't comprehend how her HOA presidency hadn't protected her from the consequences of actual crimes.